Hello everyone and welcome back to the Genesis Designs and Modelcraft bench, and here today with a couple more pages from the Book of Genesis. So the first video we just looked at some airbrushes, and this time I'm going to show you how I clean my airbrush, because I feel like that's something that crops up an awful lot whenever you look at chat boards, forums, Facebook pages, anything. The old how do you clean your airbrush, or the fact that especially newcomers to airbrushing seem to be quite worried about the task of cleaning their airbrush. So I'm going to show you how I go about cleaning my Revolution, which I have left some paint in specifically to show you this. So first things first, I'll talk to you a little bit about solvents. Now I use Tamiya acrylics, Tamiya lacquer paints and Gunze Sangyo acrylics and lacquer paints. Primarily, I do use other paints from time to time, but the vast majority of what I do centres around those paints, and they are all thinned pretty much all the time with Mr. Colour Thinner. I've got a levelling thinner now because that's all that was in the shop just lately, but the normal stuff was what I would tend to use normally. But anywho, so you can essentially consider these paints to be lacquer paints in effect because of the thinner that I've used. So there are two solvents I use with airbrush cleaning generally. The first is isopropyl alcohol. You'll see people refer to this as IPA a lot. They do not mean ale, they mean isopropyl alcohol. Medical grade. The higher grade is better if you're going to use it for thinning especially, but the lower grade stuff is fine if all you're going to use it for is cleaning out your airbrush. This is a 2 litre jug. Got this off eBay. If you search isopropyl alcohol on eBay, you'll find numerous sellers selling them in 1, 2 and 5 litre containers, and it's not terribly expensive now that the pandemic's backed off a little bit. It was unavailable for a little while for obvious reasons. The other is standard thinners, or cellulose thinners if you prefer. Again, search it up on eBay, look for gum wash. Gun wash is what this is. It's basically extremely cheap. You can see it's quite yellow. Quite often this is actually recycled stuff from the big paint shops where they empty out their spray guns and whatnot. They empty it into a big container and that gets recycled into this kind of thing. Again, very cheap. You can expect to pay no more than about £5 for a litre, and a litre should last you a little while. So that's my two main solvents, and I decant those into handy little squeezy bottles. It's much easier. I do need to top both of these up too, just to make it easier to throw it into the airbrush. I do the same with Mr. Levelling Thinners, that's decanted into a smaller tub as well. So anyway, that said, the first part of cleaning the airbrush, let's look at normal daily cleaning. Here it is with paint in it. As I said, it's got some, there's Mr. Paint lacquer paint in it. The first thing I do is spray away what's left in the brush, and you hear the tone of the brush change to indicate that there's no more paint left in there. So now it's just a paint stain in effect. And into the brush we go with a bit of this cheap cellulose thinners. And then I have a few of these gash old paintbrushes kicking about that I use specifically for this purpose, and I'm just mixing that around, cleaning out the inside, well, cleaning all the paint off the inside of the colour cup basically. It just leaves you with dirty thinners, and again I'm just going to spray this away. Now I'm not just spraying this into the ether. I have what's called an airbrush cleaning station, which is no more than a jar, which is absolutely minging. It lives in the side of my spray booth, but basically it's got a little filter in here, and you spray it in there and it collects all the wet stuff, saves your spray booth filters basically. So from there you can see that that's actually pretty clean already, and all I do from this point is wipe the colour cup out with a tissue, and then I'll chuck a little bit of IPA in there, quick spray through, lid back on, and that goes back into the airbrush holder, and that is the extent of the cleaning that my airbrush will get 99% of the time, and I'm not kidding. Same with the custom micron. That is a normal daily clean. That's a colour change clean. That's how I leave the airbrush. I can get away with that because I use this a lot, you know, not on a daily basis so much because I have a full-time job, but certainly several times a week. So let's take it one step further then, and let's strip the brush down completely, and I'll talk you through that process. I'll just turn the compressor off. So zoom you in a little. Got to try and remember to work just here now. I have a little set of tools that I use for this. Every airbrush you ever buy will come with a little spanner. Here's the one that came with my Revolution all those years ago. Seen a bit of action, as you can see. That's for unscrewing the nozzle. So first things first then, just take the back end of the airbrush off. Set that aside. If you're a particularly clumsy sort, or you have any worries, it might be worth using a tray so that your parts can't roll away. The next part to come off is the front. This is actually two parts, but they often get really tightly bound together. It doesn't really matter if you separate them or not. These are pretty stuck, so I'll leave it as it is. To remove the needle, the default option is to loosen this jam nut at the back here and withdraw the needle from the back. It is completely an option though to take it out from the front, and I'll show you how. I upgraded my spanner to this nifty little tool which has got a sort of a socket end, and it makes it easier to not over torque the end when you put it back in. Okay, so if you have your gun like this, and if you're concerned about damaging the pointed end of your needle, and to be fair with very fine airbrushes that is a concern, if you leave the nozzle off, you can insert the needle from the front, take it all the way out of the way so it's not sticking through, and then after you've refitted your air nozzle, fluid tip, that's the right word, after you've put your fluid tip back on, you would then pop your needle back through and do this up. So if you get that situation arise where your trigger's stuck because you've got a bit of paint build up down here and it's got the needle sticking, it's probably a better option to take off the fluid nozzle with your spanner and then remove the needle from the front, because that way you're not dragging all that dried paint back through that packing seal inside the body of the brush. And that's it, that's all you need to take off for a normal standard strip and clean. I will only go further than this if I'm having a problem with the air parts sticking, which sometimes you'll get so that when you push this down, see how that immediately returns. Sometimes if you get a bit of paint coming back through here, it will gum all of this up and you'll get a sort of a super slow return. It doesn't really matter, but it's fantastically annoying. So that doesn't happen very often, and this is the extent of what I would call a full strip down for the majority of the time, to be honest. So from here, to go about cleaning it, go out and invest in a set of airbrush cleaning brushes. Anywhere that sells airbrushes should also probably sell something along these lines. And using your handy amount of thinners, just dampen that brush, and you can stick it down from the front. You see it coming all the way through there. You can push that all the way through the body of the airbrush if you can get your angles right through the packing and out the back, and it just takes out all of the accumulated grime. Now if I just wipe that on here now, you can see that it has picked a little bit of that grey paint up. Once I've finished doing that and I'm happy with how clean it is, what I usually do, and this is a bit messy, is I'll pop a bit of thinners into that colour cup and use my brush just to grab out any sort of debris, because the spiral brush will normally push out a few little lumps and chunks, especially if you push it right the way through. So I just grab them out like that and then just dry everything off. Have a quick look at the front where your air passages are. You can just see that at sort of this angle here. That's the air, where the air comes through. If that looks dirty in there, it shouldn't, to be fair, but if it does, you can use a micro brush, or you can get special cotton buds from the likes of Tamria that you can pop inside and just make sure everything's clean in there, like so. That's it for the body. So if we now look at our fluid tip, it's so tiny. You can see how easy it would be to over torque that and damage those threads, especially when you remember that these are mostly made out of materials like brass. They're quite soft. You clearly can't put a pipe cleaner into that, or indeed a cotton bud. So what I have picked up at a model show a while back is this very dangerous little tool. It's a sharp, kind of a pointed sort of awl with a flat, it's sort of half round, it's got a nice sort of scrapey edge on it. If you pop that into your tip, oh god, don't lose it, pop that into your tip, just gently spin it around in there, and if there's anything in there it will pick it up. What you don't want to do is push it all the way through and robustly twirl it around, because you'll end up enlarging this aperture and ruining your tip basically. The only other way to effectively clean this if you are struggling is with the use of something like an ultrasonic cleaner, or you can leave them soaking in a container of thinners overnight if needs be. So the air nozzle itself, the air cap, for the outside you can just use a cotton bud with some thinners on it and just spin that around in there and pick up any sort of, you will get a collection of backwash and overspray sat in there. If it builds up enough it will impact the way the thing sprays, so it does need to be kept clean. And for the inside, so again it's quite small, we'll go back to that micro brush with or without thinners and just polish it out, and you see how clean that is in there. And this is coming from only ever getting cleaned the way I just showed you, so it does show that that cleaning regime is good enough. Okay, so from here then I'll just show you how to disassemble the rest of the brush if you do get a sticky trigger. This piece here will unscrew, and inside of it is a spring which may or may not, that always happens, which may or may not stay on here. Mine is quite happily residing inside that, and I'm quite happy for it to stay there. And this piece comes out, and note it has a sort of a T section on the end. And once the needle is out, the air trigger simply pulls out, because the only thing keeping that in is the fact that the needle sits through that hole there. That then gives you access to see inside, and I don't know if you'll be able to, probably can't see because of the light, but you can just see the plunger down in there that operates the air. And the way to remove that assembly from the airbrush, look up from the bottom and you can see the two slots in that base piece. You need to use either a sort of a security style screwdriver bit or a sturdy pair of tweezers, which this is not, but just to show you what I'm on about, we'll insert into there, and then you can unscrew it and take it all out. I'm not going to because I don't need to, but inside there you've basically got this rod, which is one piece that goes right through, and there's a spring on it, and that's it. So you take that all out, give everything a clean around and put it back together. So let's put it all back together again. So first things first, put this in, and note that you'll need to sort of angle it in to get the top of this into this slot. So angle it in, the top through the slot, like that, sit there. Then your threaded piece with the spring, put the spring in here, put the spring in here, it matters not. And screw it in. And we'll take that not all the way home at this stage. The reason for that being that you don't want too much tension on this piece, because you need to be able to put your trigger back in, and it's really hard to do if you've got full tension on the spring. So holding your trigger, you're out of the way, just post the trigger down the hole, confirm you've got it in, and then let that go. And once that's in position and working, then you can do this up to however tight you want it. Obviously, the less you tighten this, the less spring pressure you have on the trigger. This one isn't separately adjustable like the more expensive ones are. The whole thing moves in and out. So that's that. So I'll put the needle in from the front just to show you that. This is a water super lube, non-toxic, non-silicone. It's quite thick. The only place you really need to use it is on the needle, just to help it with the packing. It helps to seal it and it helps to keep it smooth where it runs through that nylon bush inside the body of the airbrush. So popping it in from the front, so there's no risk of damaging the tip of the needle doing this, till it comes out the back, and then we'll take it from the back and pull it all the way out. Pop this fluid tip back in, being very, very careful not to cross thread it. If there's any resistance to this tightening at all, you're cross threading it. Stop, take it out and try again. And then nip it up with your water tool or the spanner that you've got with your airbrush, and really, really don't over tighten this. There's no need. Once that's on, push that needle back through. Just a gentle tap. You don't need to ram it in there. It just needs to be home. And then tighten that up. Tighten up the compression screw at the back. We can pop our body back into position here, and then put the air cap back on as well. And that's it, done. Completely stripped, cleaned and completely put back together in probably 5 minutes or so. Put my airline connector back onto there. And then just to, as a post cleaning check, throw a bit of IPA in. Connect up the air. Make sure it sprays, which it does, and that's it. So that's a full strip and clean and a normal daily clean, both in under 20 minutes. It isn't a long job, it doesn't need to be complicated. You don't need to fully strip the airbrush every time you use it, far from it. I probably do it on average maybe as much as twice a year, which is infrequent. If you don't have the luxury of a fully set up modelling area and you have to put your airbrush away every time you use it, then it is best to store it dry, in which case you do need to clean it properly before you put it away. Just a quick note on tissue. This is just normal workshop tissue. It is cheap, but it's better than kitchen roll. It's got a bit of strength about it. I discovered recently through the use of very cheap kitchen roll that it has a habit of leaving tiny fibres inside the airbrush, and over time they collect together and eventually start to cause spraying problems, sort of minor blockages. I discovered this when I could not get either of my airbrushes to spray properly. I stripped them, and when I used my dangerous reamer, I found all these bits of these sort of collections of almost like tiny fur balls, to be honest. These tiny kitchen roll fibres that had gathered together in the fluid tip. So be aware of that. Use slightly better tissue slightly better quality tissue, or if you can, use sort of lint-free cloth types things rather than very, very cheap kitchen roll, just to try and avoid that. Okay, that's about it. As I say, very simple process, as long as you have the right solvents and tools, none of which are expensive or hard to get hold of, and in fact a lot of airbrushes will come with things like this anyway. If you are unfortunate enough to be using stuff like this as your primary means of painting, your cleaning regime will have to be a little more exhaustive, because this stuff, once it fully goes off, is quite awkward to remove. So I would recommend the use of the proprietary thinners and airbrush cleaners that go with these paints to clean your airbrushes through after use. It is a bit more awkward, but it doesn't smell, so swings and roundabouts. Okay, so that's it for that one. I hope that answers your questions. If not, feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you one way or another. So yeah, that's it for now. Cleaning airbrushes done and dusted. So until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.